We also want to configure our Apache web server, and as I've mentioned before, this might depend as well on your own setup. If you're not using virtual hosts, maybe you have your project just in the public folder, but I think you should have a virtual host, because then you're only referring to the web folder. That's the only part that you want to have public, right? So this is how I edit my own Apache config files. Conf, and then that's the name. It doesn't need to be Vim. It can just be. This could just be. Let's just use Genie, which is what I've been using so far. So these are all my virtual hosts, and I already have the sort of template for Symfony, and it's this one here. So this will be called Symfony course, and it'll have a unique port that's not repeated from the other previous virtual hosts. And then this will be Symfony course, that's the name of the folder, Symfony course again. And you also want to give your error log a unique name, so that you can see if you have errors over there. And that'll be it. That's how you update your Apache. Now you just need to restart it, so that the changes are loaded into the live server. And now I can just go localhost. That was 811, was it 3, I think? Yeah. And the file that I want to access now is called config.php. It's this one here. This file tells you if there are any issues with your Symfony installation. It might be that you're lacking some essential PHP libraries, in which case it'll tell you to install them. In our case, which is the usual case, because I've already installed Symfony a few times, I have a few web applications with Symfony, it tells me that there's just a writing permission thing with the folders. So every time that I go into a website using my web browser, in the server where that website is located, files are open, right? I'm opening config.php, and that's being opened in the server and being sent back to me in HTML. Well, the user that opens that file, that's the web server user, the Apache user. That's usually called www-data. That's the usual name for this user. If you're using like a Ubuntu and Apache, that's the most common name that you'll find. So that user needs to have the permissions to, number one, write in the cache folder, so that it can create a pre-saved version of our web app, so that it gets loaded quicker. And two, it needs to have the permissions to write in the logs in case there are any errors, in case you want to write stuff. If you're on development mode, there's a lot of stuff being written in the logs. So Symfony cannot run if the web server user does not have those permissions. How am I gonna give him those permissions? Well, I need to go to the project root, right, Symfony course, and run a couple of commands using a utility called setFacle. This again could be different according to your own system, and you can find more information in the installation guide. But by running those two commands, now the user has the permission to write in those folders and in any subfolders and subfiles inside of the folders. So if I recheck the configuration, see that now that's not a problem. It also says here that this guide will write in the file called app-config parameters.yml, but since I downloaded this using Composer, remember that we already completed some basic configurations and we don't need to write again into that file. We already did that. But if you had downloaded the file, the Symfony file, just directly from here, then you would need to have that file writable as well for this installation to work. So if I go to the next step, I won't be doing this because I already have all of this. I've already told Symfony what these values are: the user of my database, the host. So it's just gonna tell me that that's the secret again. It's just gonna tell me that I cannot write into that file, but it's okay. Let me just show you. If I go to that file, we've already that's already been filled out previously. So that's it. Now you go to welcoming page, and the very last step that I find very important. Using Git as version control is out of the scope of this course. That's enough content to have an entire course on Git. But I'm just going to show you how to create your Git repository and make your first commit. Also, I want to show you that there is already a file created for you if you run this if you did this with Composer, git ignore. It tells Git which files and folders to ignore. So you always want to ignore the vendor, the third-party libraries, because those get downloaded by the other developers using Composer. They run their own Composer command and get that from the web. You don't need to have all those files in your own repository. All of the cache and log files, you don't need those saved either. The symbolic links, those, why would you want to share that? They're not going to work in other systems. And the Composer file, in case you are keeping it in the root folder of your project, you also don't want to share that. And so I'm just going to initiate a new repository, git init, then I add all the files into that repository, and I run my first commit. And now you have a repository created with a first commit and an up and running hello world Symfony 2 web application.